Welcome to the lesson on outsourcing and global value chains. Globalization in this recent wave not only involved the expansion of the volume of trade relative to economic activity, but it also involved a shift in where production took place in the world, and it changed the very nature of international trade. Between the liberalization of trade and access to lower cost labor and the technology to standardize production processes, with information to monitor production from a distance and ship output at low cost, more economic processes were subject to outsourcing. This meant that low-wage developing countries greatly expanded their exports of goods and services. It also meant that these countries were often producing parts and components of goods that would be assembled and sold elsewhere. Production processes were broken up into parts, with different parts being produced in different countries. These networks of production, usually managed by a lead firm, are called global value chains. Automobiles and airplanes are examples of very complicated global value chains. According to one study, Boeing airplanes contain parts made in 18 countries and assembled in the United States. Consumer electronics, cell phones, computers, digital watches, televisions, microwave ovens, require parts that are fabricated in multiple countries. A study of hard disk drive production, assembled in Thailand, found that there were 21 countries involved in production of parts. A study of the Apple iPhone found that parts were made in 12 countries and assembly was done in China by a multinational corporation with its home base in Taiwan. Even when a good is produced wholly outside of the country where the parent firm, also called the lead firm, is located, there is often still a global value chain. Take denim jeans produced by Levi's. They may use cotton and cotton fabric from China and be cut and sewn in Mexico, but the branding, marketing, design, and financial decisions are made from San Francisco. This expansion of global value chains sounds quite technical, and it often is, given the logistical complications, quality control, marketing, and shipping required. But this does not imply that it is neutral in terms of the impact on people, companies, and countries. Since global value chains are typically organized and controlled by a lead firm, that firm is able to impose strict conditions on supplier firms. In turn, the supplier firms put pressure on their workers so that they, the firms, can maintain a profit margin despite the pressures on them from the lead firm. The global value chain thus embodies power relations that tend to support profits of the lead firms and large supplier firms, but puts pressure on wages and working conditions. To add to the inequity, the lead firm will often retain their profitable R&D, branding and marketing, and finance functions within the home country, and will outsource the more labor-intensive components of production, especially those that rely on lower-cost labor. This leaves the higher profit in the country of the lead firm, while many of the jobs are shifted to the location of the outsourced production. The result of these power dynamics is that value is not shared equally across countries participating in the chain. An example of these dynamics is the Apple iPhone, which was studied for where the value in the final price is earned. Many people believe the iPhone is made in China, and it's true that the phones are assembled there and then shipped around the world for sale. But many other countries produce parts of the iPhone. And if we consider design and marketing to be part of the, quote, production process, then it turns out that China gets very little of the value that comes with the final sale of a phone. China's labor accounts for just 2% of the value of the final price of the iPhone. Raw materials account for 22% of the value of the phone. Profits going to all the companies supplying parts to the phone assembled in China earned 14% of the value of the phone, and Apple's profits are 58% of the final value of the phone. Another study of the iPhone focused on the workers in the Chinese factory that assembles iPhones. The company that owns this factory is Foxconn, a Taiwanese company, and the labor standards in that company have been known to require extremely long hours and very low pay. One result was a spate of suicides by the workers, who simply could not bear to continue the work, but saw no alternative path. In their book, Dying for an iPhone, the authors show that Foxconn profits soared as these labor conditions remained inhumane. Work in these supplier firms is often at very low pay with long hours and unhealthy and unsafe conditions. An extreme example was clothing manufacturing in Bangladesh, where a fire broke out in a factory and there were no exit doors available. Over 100 people died in the fire in which the entire building collapsed. Thus, we are left with what economist Danny Roderick calls the globalization paradox. Globalization had such obvious promise for greater efficiency and for opportunity for those who had been left out of the previous wave of industrialization. But the promise has not been realized. And in fact, the failure for the process to deliver for people has generated a political backlash that in recent years has threatened the prospects for democracy in many countries, as governments have turned away from the neoliberalism associated with hyperglobalization and have imposed nationalist policies on trade and immigration, and generally shown disdain for liberal embrace of a free press, an independent judiciary, cultural and ethnic diversity. National democracy and deep globalization are incompatible. The tragedy of the Rana Plaza factory in Bangladesh also provides a lesson about the future of globalization. After the incident, the apparel companies whose clothing was being produced there joined together in an agreement with the Bangladesh manufacturers to work towards improvement in the safety of working conditions there. These agreements have led to mixed outcomes. They are far from perfect, but they hint at a point we want to turn to in our final module, that the economy and the institutions that underpin it are created by political and social action. They are not natural or inevitable. This gives a sense that the power asymmetries we have seen in labor markets and in the globalization process generally can be addressed with political change and an imagination that economic processes can serve people, their well-being, their dignity, and their sense of common purpose for humanity. In this lesson, you've learned about the economics of outsourcing and power relations within global value chains. In the next lesson, we will explore inequality due to globalization.